I recently surveyed over 200 mountain bikers from around the world and I asked them, what one thing spoils your rides? And one of the most common answers was knee pain. So if knee pain ruins your rides, if it spoils your racing and means you don't get to enjoy your riding as much as you'd like, then keep on watching, because first of all, we're going to diagnose what is causing your knee pain, and then most importantly, we're going to give you a plan of action to go about fixing it so you can get back on the bike and back to enjoying the sport we love. Before we get into it, a quick introduction. My name's Ben, and for the last decade, I've coached well over 1,000 mountain bikers from around the world to be fitter, stronger, and to enjoy their riding more. From weekend warriors, pro riders, beginners, people riding hardline, and even Red Bull Rampage, I've coached them all, so I know what works and I know what doesn't. So let's get into it. First of all, let's talk about your knee, and actually anyone's knee. And the first thing you need to understand is that the knee is called a hinge joint. And basically it does this, like a hinge. And hinge joints, they like to bend in that one direction, but what they don't like to do is move sideways or twist. Other joints in our body do that. Your shoulder, your hip, they move in all different directions, not your knee. Your knee is a hinge joint, and we need to bear that in mind. And so the way your knee moves, in particular if it moves outside of the way it wants to, is largely controlled by what's going on above it and below it. And we're going to get more into that later. But the bottom line is, the first thing I want you to think about is that just because you've got a knee pain doesn't mean there's actually a problem with your knee. Before we get into assessing the causes of your knee pain, I just want to narrow this down. When we talk about knee pain, it can mean many, many things. What we're talking about here is you go for a long ride and after a couple of hours, it starts to get a bit uncomfortable, a bit painful, maybe it ramps up through the ride. What we're not talking about here is knee pain where you've had a big crash and you've smashed it in the floor, you've twisted it, something's popped, something's gone crack, or it's a very sharp, acute pain. Those are more specific injuries that are going to require seeing a medical professional or going to see a physio or a good sports therapist. If you go and see any decent strength coach or physio and you tell them that you're getting knee pain on long bike rides, then they're going to start with an assessment, and that is where you need to start. And what we're doing with the assessment process is we're trying to gather clues about what's going on with your body, because there's a load of nonsense out there on the internet that just says, if your knee hurts when you're cycling, do this. What? It's like there are so many possible causes. This is super complex, okay? And basically all of them either don't have a clue or they just don't care and they're trying to mislead you. So we need to go through this assessment process. And I like to do it the old-fashioned way. You can do it on your phone or whatever. I like to get my notebook out and I'm going to start making notes and gathering the clues from on the bike, possibly on an indoor bike if you have access to one, and then off the bike we can do some assessment as well. We're going to gather those clues, put it together, then I'm going to tell you how to use that to then give you a course of action, which is going to be some form of mobility and probably some form of strength training to go with it to get everything working correctly. First things first, we're going to start on the bike assessment. And if it's on the mountain bike where your knees hurt, then you're going to go for a ride, preferably on your own so you can faff about a little bit, and we're going to work our way up. So try and ride along normally, just on a fire road or something like that. Look down. Are your feet basically straight? Are they symmetrical? Now, if you are riding clipped in, then they probably are, unless you set your cleats in an unusual situation. If, like me, you ride flat pedals, then there might be a bit more going on here at the feet. Are they both basically pointing forwards, or does one turn out a bit, or does one turn in a bit? Write it down. We'll talk about what happens later. Similarly, carry on riding and try and ride just naturally and normally, which is kind of difficult. So you've done the feet, ride another couple of minutes, just nice and relaxed. Look down. What are your knees doing? Are they in? Are they out? Are they symmetrical? Does it look like everything is nicely lined up? Is your knee basically over your foot and underneath your hip? Does it look like we've got this hinge motion going on here? Or does it look like your knee on one side, the side that hurts, is brushing that top tube at the top? Or similarly, at the top of the pedal stroke, does your knee kick out to the side? Write it down, put a note in your phone. When I'm on the saddle, am I actually square and straight? Or is one hip a little bit forwards? Maybe if you can ride no hands, you probably can. reach behind without falling off your bike. Have a feel, are you symmetrical on your saddle, or are you kind of, is one side hanging off the back and one side forwards? Write it down. Now, I did say ride on your own, but actually a riding buddy can be quite helpful. Instead, get someone to ride exactly behind you. Imagine there's like a line splitting your body in half. They want to have their phone, or your phone even, lined up with your back tyre, so exactly in the middle, and just ride along while you pedal up a steady climb. Or if steep climbs are where you get your pain, then maybe even a steep climb if they can get up it riding one hand, okay? Get them to film it, and even get them to film you from the side if it's safe to do so. We're just trying to gather evidence, get those notes down, get the videos down, and we're going to have a look at it all later. Bit awkward. Dave, do you mind filming my bum while I ride my bike up the road? Cheers. If you have access to a turbo trainer or an indoor bike, either at your home or at the gym, then I would also do some assessment in that environment too. And you can do it one of two ways, okay? You can either use a mirror, okay, and then make notes, but I actually think it's best to use your phone and little tripod or something and video it, okay? Because then we get it perfectly lined up, and then you can go through it slowly, you can scrub in slow motion, maybe grab a freeze frame and really see what's going on. And we're basically going to do the same process that we talked about outside. So get yourself set up on your bike, and probably most people are going to be clipped in on their indoor bike, okay, regardless whether they ride flats outdoors. So start clipped in, do this whole assessment process, okay? So head on, are they symmetrical? What are the knees doing? What are the feet doing? You know, and gather that information with your camera set up. But then also what I would like you to do is you can either, well, ideally switch out the pedals and put flats on it, even if you don't normally ride flats, just wear a normal pair of Vans or trainers on any set of crap flat pedals just to do the process, because as you pedal, your feet are then going to sit where they want to sit, not where you've forced them to be. And that's going to give us good information as well. And if where your feet want to be on flats is actually very different to where they are clipped in, then there's some sort of tension and torque going on here that may be an issue, guess what, with your knee pain. And guess what we're going to do? We're going to write it down, okay, because we want to gather as much information as possible, otherwise we're just guessing. Okay, we're going to put the bikes aside now, and we're going to jump into the gym. And we're going to start off with the most simple of assessments, okay? Just kind of jog, like walk on the spot, you look like a maniac, and then just nice and relaxed, just stand like you would normally. So you haven't thought about where you put your feet. Look down. What's going on? Are you stood there like Pingu, with your toes turned out to the sides? Are you turned in all like narrow? Or are they actually basically straight and basically symmetrical? Because that is what we want in life and on the bike. Not sure, do it again, nice and relaxed, just jog on the spot, jump up and down, and you're basically going to land in your natural position, okay? Again, film it, use the mirror, write it down. Now things are going to get a little bit more technical, and we're going to do a couple of proper physio or strength coach style assessments to really figure out what's going on. And the first one is called a modified Thomas test. Now, what this is going to do is this is going to assess your hip flexor and also an element of your quad and what's going on through basically the front of your body, through your hip and through your knee. And this is where I'm always going to start. So ideally in the gym or at home, you're going to get yourself a nice firm surface, maybe a sturdy kitchen table, okay? I use a plyo box at the gym, or if you have access to one, use a proper treatment bed. You're going to sit right on the edge of the surface, and basically what I want you to do is grab your knee with your hands, pull it into your chest and gently roll back. Now what we're looking for here is for your back to basically be flat on the surface. We don't want a big arch in the back. If there is an arch, then just pull your knee in a bit more and it's just going to gently close that off. You shouldn't be able to get a hand underneath your back. Now, let's say I'm holding my right leg into my chest. That means I'm going to be assessing my left leg. Basically, what I want is for your upper leg, your femur, your thigh, to be going out in a straight line or even slightly below your hip. That's the first thing we're looking for. What direction is the upper leg going? If your upper leg has a big gap under your thigh off the top of the box, and basically your knee is higher than your hip, then we've got some tightness in your hip flexor zone, okay? Now, normally, if I were assessing you, I would measure this with a tape measure, I would record it. You're on your own probably, so you can't do that. So what you need to be doing is you need to film this side on, exactly 90 degrees perpendicular, okay? Take a note, what is that doing? The second thing we want to have a look at is what the lower leg is doing. Is the lower leg below the knee hanging straight down or mostly straight down? Because that is what we want. If the lower leg is basically sticking straight forwards or at 45 degrees, then that's suggesting there's a lot of tension in the quad and the upper leg that's holding it up there. Again, use the video, write it down. Now what I would do is I'd sit up, shake it out, change sides, move your camera over, and we're going to repeat that process on the other leg. Finally, we're also going to basically move the camera around so it's basically filming right up your butt crack, okay, straight up the midline of your body, okay. It's only for you to watch, no one else is going to watch it, and do exactly the same process. And what we're looking for is you'll probably have the same things happen side to side, but what I want to see is on the leg we're assessing, so if I'm holding my right leg in, I'm assessing my left leg, does it naturally swing out to the side as part of this process? For some people it will, for most people it probably won't. And guess what, if it does, the video evidence is there, write it down. It's another clue that's going to help you to take a good course of action to fix your knee pain. The next physio assessment we're going to do is called a Faber test, and that is going to assess your hip's ability to externally rotate in the socket basically. And whilst you may not think that's that important because we pedal hopefully roughly lined up, it's super important for your hip to function properly, to be powerful on the bike, and to therefore control and keep the knee lined up. Okay, so what we're going to do for this, you're going to lie on the floor is best, or a nice firm surface, but it needs to be long enough for your whole body. Again, you're going to line up your camera on a little tripod on your midline, looking at the butt crack, okay, X-rated. Right, what we're going to do now is with one leg straight, lying flat on the floor, I'm going to cross my other leg. So I'm going to rest my ankle just above the knee of the straight leg and let the knee of the other leg drop out to the side, like you can see here. So what I'm looking for is how far down that knee is able to go out to the side. Now we're looking for a couple of things here. On the video, you're going to be able to see roughly the angle of that shin, and we want it kind of parallel to the floor or just slightly up. Okay, that's one way to think about it. Or if you can imagine getting two fists like this, you should be able to get roughly two fists under the outside of the knee between that and the floor. If the shin angle is greater or getting out towards 45 degrees, or it's much more than two fists under the knee, then that is suggesting that your hip is tight on that side, okay, and you don't have access to a full range of motion. Guess what? Write that down, keep hold of your video. We're then going to repeat the process on the other side, and as well as looking at the scores, we're looking for symmetry. Are they the same? Is there any correlation between the tight side and your knee pain, for instance? Write it down. It's all adding clues, okay, as we try and figure out what is going on. Final note on doing this correctly is, especially if you're a person with bigger legs, a bit more sturdy, then maybe the weight of your leg can sometimes twist the whole body over and crank you outwards, especially if you are tight. Don't let that happen. Keep your hips level and parallel to the floor. We do not want to allow the body to twist. So then, like Sherlock Holmes, you should have a notebook full of clues now, and maybe some handy videos on your phone to help as well. Let's get into what, in my experience, are the four main causes of knee pain for mountain bikers. So first of all, number one, on the modified Thomas test, when we're on the line on our back and the lower leg is not hanging straight down, and in fact that leg that you're testing is kind of straight or nearly straight, that is implying that there's a lot of tension held in the quad on that leg. Now, what happens there is that when we've got a lot of tension in that quad, is it basically pulls on the patella, it pulls on the kneecap, and it means it doesn't quite slide nicely through the groove where it's supposed to work, okay? And so what we want to do is we want to do a bit of work to relieve that, take some tension out of it, and hopefully get that patella gliding through its groove smoothly and correctly to remove your knee pain. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to add in a few doses of weekly mobility training, where as well as focusing on the hip flexor, we're going to focus on getting full knee flexion. We want to try and achieve that full knee flexion in a few different ways. First of all, we can do a couch stretch up against the wall or on a sofa, where we really focus on getting that knee close back to the wall to really get that closed in angle that we're looking for, okay? Even if it means there's less stretch in the hip, if you get more through the quad and a more closed knee angle, then that's going to be better in this case. Similarly, we can go into like a split position on the mats, okay? But pull your foot up towards your bum at the rear, and that is quite an intense one as well. You just have to breathe your way through it. You can also do some foam rolling on the quad or use a massage gun as well. Okay, I'm not going to get into all the details exactly how to do that, do some research, but basically we want the tissue to just get some release, okay, break down any adhesions, any knots, so that everything is sliding smoothly to enable it to release that tension on the knee. Finally, I would add in some knee flexion as part of your pre-ride mobility and warm-up process, okay? So we want to always warm up before you ride, and I bet you don't, okay? Most people don't, even though I'm always telling them they should. But now you are going to warm up before a ride, let's try and loosen off the hip flexor and try and get some full knee flexion before you ride, and let's see how you get on. Diagnosis number 2 is going to be some sort of weakness in your glute, okay, i.e. your bum, the side of your hip, and possibly some tightness in your groin muscles, okay? And the way we're going to know this is when you analyze your pedaling with your video or by just looking at yourself. Typically this is going to show as your knee coming in, most likely at the top of the pedal stroke, but sometimes at the bottom as well. So if your knees are moving out of line towards the bike, then this is what you need to do. So what I want you to think about is that hinge joint that we talked about earlier, and basically your upper leg, your thigh, is controlled by your hip muscles and your mobility there. And if the muscles in the side of your hip, okay, your glute med or medius, okay, are weak and not doing their job properly, then they fail to keep that upper leg lined up, and then that lets the upper leg come across, putting that angle on the knee, putting pressure on the knee. The other place this may come from, if you are strong in the glutes, but most people aren't if I'm honest, is if you do have some sort of tightness in the groin, and that's literally going to pull the upper leg towards the midline of the bike. So that's the way I want you to think about this. So we're going to do a few things about it then. First of all, we want to strengthen that hip, strengthen the glutes. And one of my classic foundational exercises I basically do with everyone is called a side plant leg raise. And it doesn't look like much, but if you're weak in the hips, then this is brutal. And if you struggle to do 10 reps on each side, then this is going to be a game changer for you in terms of your looking after your knees when you're riding. So 3 sets of 10 on each side. Start off doing it on the knee, okay? Then as you get stronger, you can do full leg reps, okay, where you rest on your foot and ankle instead of on the knee. Try and do that a few times a week, and over the course of a few weeks, it's going to get a lot easier. You should be able to make some quick progress. And that's really going to strengthen those hips. The second exercise I would use is something called a supported airplane. And this is great for your hip mobility and strengthening the hip and hamstring, okay? This is way harder than it looks, but at the same time, you also get a lovely little groin stretch at the top in a really safe way. So that is my go-to movement, my go-to exercise to try and correct these issues when people come to me with knee pains, okay? Side plant leg raise, supported airplane, 3 sets of 10 of each, a few times a week. Come back to me in a month and I'll bet your knee doesn't hurt. Number 3 is about probably a tightness and also a weakness in this hip area that we just talked about on number 2, okay? But in particular, it's a tightness. And the clues that lead us here is all about the knees and what's going on again. And in particular, when the knees are going out, okay, or one of your knees, sorry, is going out as part of the pedal stroke, usually again at the top of the pedal stroke, if your knee kicks out to the side. And when you do the Faber test, if you find that your hip is tight and the knee can't fall out to the side and you've got a greater than 2-fist gap under the knee, then that is going to point you down this path. So what's happening here is when this hip is tight, it's going to be pulling the leg outwards, okay, and with it the knee, because remember the knee does what the hip and the ankle tells it, okay. So what we want to do is we want to start working some mobility here, and a real simple like yoga style we can do is a pigeon stretch. And again, little and often is really effective. A few minutes every day over the space of a few weeks, you can start to make some progress here. If you have access to some weights, then a really effective move you can do is a kettlebell or dumbbell weight shift, where you're in a tall kneeling position. You really get those, squeeze that bum, squeeze the hips forward, and you're going to transfer your weight across with the hip externally rotated as far as it will go. And you're going to hold these positions for 30 seconds on each side for a few reps. And this is really effective if you've got a weight available. The final thing that I'll do here is actually the same as the last one. Even though the issue is kind of different, they actually overlap. And that's where I'd use a supported airplane, because often the cause of a tight hip, in this case, where it's tight, it's short, tightness often comes from weakness, okay? It just means that where it's weak, the body's protecting itself, so it's shortening and tightening up because it doesn't feel it's strong enough to be long. So let's do those side plant leg raises and that supported airplane to strengthen that hip as well. Number 4, and the final of the big 4 that I want to talk about today, is a tightness and almost certainly weakness in your hip flexor. The main way we find this out is through the modified Thomas test, where we're looking at the angle of the thigh. Okay, so if the thigh is traveling upwards, you've got a gap underneath the thigh, and if the knee ends up higher than the hip, then that's going to suggest there's a tightness in the hip flexor. Now, this is what I always say, tightness or weakness, okay? Because basically everyone who I ever assess in this zone, if they got tight hip flexors, they got weak hip flexors. So we want to take a two-pronged approach. Number 1, hip flexor stretching, okay? Like I talked about earlier, we're going to hit the couch stretch, but I want more emphasis on the hip rather than that knee flexion, okay? And we can also, and it's really unpleasant, get a mobility ball in there, get a foam roller right around the top of the thigh, right in that crease basically, try and release things to release the tension in there. The final mobility we want to do is a banded hip distraction, and you're going to need a heavyweight resistance band and somewhere sturdy to lash it to in order to make this work. And basically just takes your hip flexor stretch and turns it up to 11, and it really helps to open up the hip capsule. It actually feels amazing. So we're doing the mobility work. Now it's time to do some hip strengthening work. And this is something that very few people do, and it's actually one of the things that makes my over 40s program and much of my programming so effective for people and helps them to enjoy their riding more, is they do these unusual exercises they've never heard of, and all of a sudden their knee pain clears up. Just saying. So first of all, we're going to get on the floor and do an exercise that looks really easy, but is probably going to be really hard for you. It's called a foot over drill, and I want you to sit in a nice upright position, pull one knee into the chest, and that's going to stop you cheating. Point your toes, just like you did at ballet class back in the day. I won't tell anyone. And you're basically going to lift your foot over. We'll just start with the water bottle. Nice and controlled. Over and back. Over and back. Try not to let yourself lean back, because that's making it easier. That's taking the load off the hip flexor. Pull the knee in tight. Sit up tall, okay, and work that hip flexor. And it probably won't take long to start burning. You might even get a cramp if you're really lucky. If you do, tell me in the comments. Blech. The second thing we can do is up on your feet, and it's called leg scales. And it's a similar sort of vibe where I'm going to stand on a perfectly straight leg with a perfectly straight body, squeeze my bum and just try and lift that front leg up in front of me, ideally pointing the toes, and we're really going to isolate the hip flexor. When you do this, everyone tries to cheat. You're either going to try and bend your standing leg, okay, bend the knee, or you're going to try and lean back, because this is a hard exercise, okay. For both of them, 10 to 15 reps, we may as well do both sides, 3 sets a few times a week, and then you're going to start making progress. So those are the big 4, and that's probably going to cover the vast majority of people who are watching this, okay? And if one of those doesn't sort it out for you, then you need to go and see a physio or a really good coach, basically, with really good knowledge of physiology and how to go about diagnosing and giving you a plan of action. There are a load of other things that can be going on, or little things that you can just try. The first one is foam rolling your ITB, your iliotibial band, basically the outside of the thigh. And I haven't really talked about that yet, because often that becomes an issue because of what's going on at the hip, okay? And so that's why I haven't really talked about it, but some people get some relief by foam rolling, massage gun, or sports massage down the ITB on the outside of the hip, but it probably comes down the outside of the thigh, but it probably comes from an issue somewhere else, which is why I didn't mention it so far. Number two, again, more advanced. Are your legs actually the same length? I don't know, but I don't have a big knee issue, so it doesn't matter. If you've got a big discrepancy in leg length, then go and see a good physio or someone to really get it properly measured, and then you may need to run an insole or something in one of your shoes to balance things out, and that can make a really big difference. Another one to think about is crank length. Now, I've been running 155mm Hope cranks for several years now, and I'm not going back. I love them. They feel better down the hill. I think they feel better up the hill. And critically, they put a lot less strain on your knee. In particular, at the top of the pedal stroke, that angle is less. There's less of an acute angle. So especially if you're a shorter rider, maybe consider trying out or buying some shorter cranks. I'll be sure to put a link to these Hope ones in the description below. Those of you that know me know that I'm a big fan of flat pedals. I'm flat pedals for life, okay? I'm never going to be clippy in on this bike, I don't think. And if your knee is hurting and you're normally clipped in, then even if you're not planning to go flats forever, let's just take the stress off of your knee and ride flats for a while and see if it gets better. Like, it may be your cleat position or something going on. And then once you've done the work from points 1 to 4 that I talked about, maybe then you can go back to clipping in, or maybe you make an adjustment to your cleat position or something to allow for it. Finally, for those of you who've been paying attention, I talked about how your knee gets affected by what's above it and what's below it. And I've only really talked about the hip. I haven't actually talked about the foot and ankle. And there's a reason for that. And that's basically because your foot and ankle is super complicated. There's so much more going on there, arguably, than the hip. And so look, if when you assessed your pedaling, your feet weren't straight on the pedals, that's a clue that there's something going on from the ankles up. Similarly, when you're stood, are you in, are you out? Is one in and one out, okay? You've got all those clues, okay? And that's the sort of thing there where, in my opinion, you need to be going to a physio, okay? When there's complex stuff going on with the foot and ankle, it can be hard to fix. Similarly, if someone has got very flat feet, then at the bottom of the pedal stroke, their foot collapses and often the knee will go in towards the bike. But then as they go round the pedal stroke, their foot then moves back up in the chute and then maybe goes out at the top. So if you're someone with flat feet, your knee might go in at the bottom, out at the top, and maybe an insole or an orthotic is going to help you to correct that. But again, go and see a professional, don't just take it from me. So there you go, quite in depth, but it really needs to be. Anyone who tells you this is the one thing to do to fix your knee is speaking absolute nonsense. They're trying to sell you something. After a period of, let's say 4 weeks, yeah, commit to this. Is it improving? Reassess, film yourself again, write down notes again, keep a training diary, and then I'm really confident that with these tips, you can get rid of your knee pain to carry on enjoying mountain biking just like we all want to.